Good morning. Um, Faith of Our Fathers was chosen to be sung this morning after finding a 1961 Father's Day bulletin in from the EUB church that was in some of the files we had gone through. So we felt it was appropriate for this occasion as we celebrate our founding fathers and mothers, as it was their strong faith that has led us to where we are today. So we're now going to take a quick look at 150 years of Methodist ministry and service in Elmwood. This summer, when Pastor Michelle attended the annual conference, she was presented with a certificate for our church commemorating 150 years of ministry and service in Elmwood. During an administrative council meeting, it was decided to celebrate this milestone, not really realizing what lay beneath the service other than the Methodists came, they built, they stayed. Before we get into specific churches that came before us, take a moment to think back on your elementary history classes. 1862, the Homestead Act was signed, bringing many people west to settle. This brought many settlers to the Elmwood area, where they received 160 acres of land in exchange for living on it, improving it, and a small registration fee. During the period of 1861 to 65, the country was involved in the Civil War, which ended in 1865. 1867, Nebraska became a state, and in 1886 was a busy year for this area. A plat was filed to create the village of Elmwood, which had 98 inhabitants at the time. The Missouri Pacific Railroad track was completed between Union and Lincoln. The first bank, the Bank of Elmwood, was founded. The first newspaper, the Elmwood Echo, was started. And James Green opened his drugstore, to name just a few of the events of that year. Also, for the 3 years between 1874 and 1876, the grasshoppers destroyed every sign of vegetation, leaving nothing of value in their pathway. Prairie fires were a continual source of danger as well. Every home had its bit of plowed ground surrounding the buildings as a protection from the fires. Such devastations induced the faithful to look to a higher power for strength to endure hardships and to help establish his kingdom. As we delve into our history, we find it a rich and full testimony to God's love through three branches that have come together to form St. Paul United Methodist Church. These three branches are the Elmwood Methodist Episcopal Church, Emmanuel Evangelical United Brethren, the EUB Church, and the St. Paul Evangelical United Brethren EUB Church. We're going to start first with the fellowship of the Methodist Episcopal Church, which began here in 1871. Services, or classes they were called, were held in 4 one-room schoolhouses. Flowers School was located 2 miles north and 3 east of Elmwood, the Four Corners in Elmwood on a hill. Stove Creek School, 2 miles east. Stove Creek, over there. McKeag School, 3 miles north and 1 mile east. And Thompson School, which was also called Elmwood School, 1/2 mile east down by the ford of Stove Creek. Remember, the schools were built to be within walking distance for the students, and it made sense that they were also used for the first church services. The preacher, called a circuit rider because he traveled from place to place on horseback. Each circuit had 2 or more places of worship. The first Elmwood class was organized in 1874 in the Stove Creek School, thus our 150th anniversary. The charter members were C.L. Bailey, C.W. Holton, and John Clements. These gentlemen were leaders in the community and were also among the 13 who signed the plat to incorporate Elmwood. Later, the church home moved to the Grand Army of the Republic, the GAR Hall, which had been built in 1865. This building is still standing in that location today. This was the Christian church next to it, which is burned in 1994. And Neihart Jewelry Store was next door. You'll notice this is a dirt road, and at that time it was called Park Street, and today it's East D Street. B.I. Clements took up subscriptions and purchased a new organ. This was a prize purchase, and Miss Phillips was imported from another town to be the organist. No imported organist for us today. We stay local as we are blessed to have Laurel and Owen as our organist. Prior to 1879, the United Brethren held meetings at Center School, then discontinued services and joined with the Methodist. A hand water pump is still standing today at the location of Center School, named because it was located in the center of the section. There's Center School. This is Highway 34, Older Kings, Schrader's, Hall's, Miller's, Nielsen's, and Roseno's on this side. So right there was where the school was located. In 1887, the Clear Creek Circuit members from 2 miles west and 1/2 mile north, or a 1/4 mile north of Elmwood, united with the Stove Creek class at the GAR Hall. Philander Williams had started this class and was known to be especially gifted in prayer and was a power in class meetings. In 1879, Charlie Clapp donated a lot on the north end of Main Street where a parsonage, which became a great meeting place for prayer meetings and religious gatherings, was built. It was noted in several sources that it was remarkable how many people they could fit into this small house. Unfortunately, we found no pictures of this house. In 1886, the Methodists received $500 from the Church Extension Society for a new church, and the ladies raised $105 from serving election dinners and other suppers for a church bell. The people were so anxious to help raise money for the bell that many paid much more than the price of the meals. And you figured the price of the meals at that point was probably 10 cents or a quarter. The bell, the first church bell in Elmwood, was purchased from Cincinnati, Ohio foundry and was hung before the church was completed. The first Methodist church was built at the top of the hill across from the old village hall. So this is D Street. This is Highway 1. Okay. The bank. So down the street a little, and on the north side was where the church was built. It's near what we know as Highway 1 and E Street. The church was completed and dedicated in the spring of 1887. In March of 1894, Reverend Campbell preached a rousing sermon from the text of, "For the Lord loveth a cheerful giver," and then explained what they wanted to do for improvements and proposed to raise enough money to do it. In less than 1 hour, $1,125 had been raised. These improvements included moving the church 2 lots west over a basement with a choir addition on the east side and a basement entrance on the west of the tower. Work began on Monday following his sermon, and 3 cars of brick were ordered from Weeping Water. In the same year, a parsonage was erected near the church building and then moved. This was the parsonage, and then moved when it was located a little further west, closer to the church. A modern parsonage, which still stands today, was built in 1924. And you can see the Dr. Van Fleet Church in the background there. Dr. Peter Van Fleet was the minister from 1912 to 1916. In 1914, he approached the members of the congregation with the idea of building a new church. His aspirations to build a new church were met with discouragement from all sides. The existing church building, a small frame affair with seating capacity of about 200 and a small basement for Epworth League and Sunday school work, was in a fair state of repair and would last for many years, it was argued. Also, the proposition of raising $10,000 seemed like a mountain that could not be scaled. Dr. Van Fleet did not lose his enthusiasm, though, and a subscription paper was finally drawn up and circulated among church members and friends. The result was that $9,000 was subscribed in a few weeks, including $2,000 from Dr. Van Fleet. Once plans were drawn up and opened for bids, it was determined it would cost $12,000 instead of the original $10,000 as thought. Instead of changing the plans to reduce the cost, Dr. Van Fleet came to the rescue and guaranteed to raise $2,000 additional by the time the church was dedicated. So, church was there. Church construction began in June 1914, and the cornerstone laid September the 22nd. The old frame church was sold and torn down. During construction of the new church building, services were held in the Hobbs Opera House. The new church building, which could seat 600, was completed and dedicated on May the 9th, 1915, at a cost of $12,000. Dr. Van Fleet also guaranteed to raise sufficient funds to place art windows in the new church. And you can see this one here. And if you look around today, you will see all of these windows in our church. Because of his generous donation and zeal, it was named the Dr. Peter Van Fleet Memorial Methodist Episcopal Church, not due to any efforts of Dr. Van Fleet, for he preferred that it should not, but in respect and reverence of him, it was right and proper that it should be so. Some years later, in 1939, at the Methodist Uniting Conference, the name Episcopal was dropped. Dr. Van Fleet had come from Holland when he was 6 years old and worked his way through college and theology training. He was a circuit rider and devoted his life to building churches and congregations. His work and love was extended to the children, especially those in need of help. Later, when Dr. Van Fleet heard that the church was in need of a pipe organ, he donated one in memory of his wife, who had passed away on November the 3rd, 1929. So there's the pipe organ he donated, and we have some pipes from this organ that will be on display up here at the front of the church after the service, so please take time to look at them. Our history also includes that of the Victoria Church, located near Cottage Hill School, 2 miles south and 3 miles east of Elmwood. Cottage Hill, this church was named for Victoria, the wife of Adam Cross. One account says she donated a half acre for the church, and another says that he donated the half acre for the church. During a glorious revival meeting, 60 converts were gained. They came to Claps Grove to be baptized in the creek, which is down between where we live and where Mix is. But before they got home, a hard rain drenched them yet again. Built in 1892, this church was abandoned for a time, then revitalized and called Epworth Chapel, until destroyed by a tornado on September the 9th, 1921. The Elmwood Echo reported that the church had been taken off of its foundation and dropped several feet away. The lumber can only be used for kindling. Members from the Epworth Chapel then joined the Methodist Episcopal Church in Elmwood. We're now going to back up a little bit and bring St. Paul Evangelical United Brethren Church into the picture. By 1890, Elmwood had 400 residents. In March 1891, the pastor from the Emmanuel Evangelical Church, located 3 miles east of Murdoch on Church Road, began to also preach in Elmwood. The congregation grew so rapidly that the following year, Reverend A. Althouse was assigned to Elmwood. He also served Callahan Church west of Murdoch, which continued to be yoked with Elmwood until 1926. So now we have, I'll go on, sorry. 1892, a church building was constructed in Elmwood at the corner of the present day North 1st Street and West E at a cost of $1,200. So it's there. So this is a really cool bird's eye view of Elmwood. So the ME Church, the parsonage, you go up over here, it was the German Lutheran Church. The Catholic Church is out of this picture to the right. If you go on up the street, you will see it's probably the parsonage from the EUB Church, and then the EUB Church was across the street right there. The custom at that time was for the men to sit on the east side and the women on the west side of the building. In 1895, the Elmwood Echo reported that the musical liturgy given by the young people was the best since the church had been built. The congregation was formed among the German-speaking people in the community, so all services were conducted in the German language until 1912. A few activities continued in German until 1918, which would have coincided with the conclusion of World War I. Camp meetings were a feature of this church, and several were held at the city park, then Claps Grove, 1/2 mile east of Elmwood, where Adams crosses Stove Creek. In 1917, a district camp meeting was also held in the park. $4,000 in major renovations to the church happened in 1916 when it was moved back a quarter turn around to the east. The steeple and entryway were removed. The back room and balcony were added, giving more Sunday school and seating capacity. In 1951, another major renovation occurred when the balcony was removed, a basement dug, and new furnace installed. This again gave more Sunday school room as well as a kitchen and fellowship hall. The church grew in size and by 1963 had 165 members. The parsonage was built across the street where the Filson family currently lives. The first one was sold and moved in 1920, then the new one was built at a cost of $9,000. In 1969, Emmanuel Church east of Murdoch on Church Road was discontinued after serving its community for 97 years. The cemetery is still there, and there is a monument there with this sign on it, designating it as the site of Emmanuel Church. Some of the members joined the Murdoch Church, and others joined Elmwood. When the General Conference voted to unite the Evangelical United Brethren Church and Methodist churches, the Elmwood churches began the process under the pastorate of Joseph B. Rowe, who served both churches. At first, they had early services in one building and later services in the other. Then it was decided to alternate Sunday services. Since this proves confusing, the two congregations voted to meet in the larger brick Methodist church. In 1969, the uniting of the three churches was finalized, and they became St. Paul United Methodist Church. St. Paul United from the St. Paul United Brethren, and Methodist from the Methodist Episcopal Church. The old church was torn down for lumber, and the lot was sold. This is where we're going to leave you today. In 1975, a new church was built, and we invite you to join us at a date yet to be decided this spring for the rest of our story, as we celebrate the 50th anniversary of the building of this beautiful building. In closing, I would like to thank Myrna for all of her help. We had no idea what we were getting into when we said we were going to do this. We'd also like to thank everybody for their input, the photos, documents, artifacts, stories, support on this project to bring our history up to date. After the service, we'll be setting up some displays. We're going to move them in here, and there might still be a couple in the other room, but the door will be open. There will also be a looping slideshow with the photos from this and some additional photos of prior pastors that we found in the files. So please take a moment, look at the artifacts, and have a seat and watch the slideshow for a little bit. So that's where we're going to leave you today, but please come back next spring.